Good evening. My name is Jeff Shelton. I work out at Station 15 in Silverado Canyon. I'm a captain there. This will be my 35th season throwing dirt at fires, and that only means that I've either seen or made every mistake that can be made. Which is good sometimes because you are able to look ahead and see what's going on. So what I'm going to cover this evening is looking at a seasonal assessment from a wildfire perspective for our area. So this is our station up at the top of the Maple Springs gate. If you go all the way up Silverado Canyon, that's our engine, and that is snow on the ground and around, which is it kind of leads into what we had this winter. When we go over this, we look at a lot of things to determine fire behavior. We look at what we call our fire behavior triangle, and it is a combination of the topography, which is the lay of the land, the weather, and then what we call fuel. And when we look at fuel, what you consider vegetation or plants, I look at as stored energy. It's simply stored energy. Whether it's that grass out there, that well-watered shrub, it all has a certain amount of stored energy in it. And so we'll look at that, and we'll talk about our fuel conditions, the regional status, not only in Rancho, Santa Margarita and Orange County, but in the state. Because what happens in the state often precludes what we experience here in Orange County. And we'll look at those local implications. So, setting the stage, everybody knows that it was an early, very wet winter. And we had record-setting precipitation. It was welcome until it wasn't, right? We had, everybody enjoyed it, just like this spring. I think a lot of people are over the May gray and June gloom already, especially following the winter. But we had then November to late January, it just seemed to never stop. And then we had a couple weeks in February that were really pleasant. So you have a lot of water, and then you have some sun in the middle of the winter, and the vegetation responded. Then we had another set of rains that went from February, and it seemed to lead right into March. A lot of rain, record-setting rain for not only Orange County, but for the state. And then now we're in a cool spring, very cool pattern from spring, April all the way into June. And so you have a combination of factors that are leading up to setting the stage for what the fire season is going to look like. Our water year, when they measure water from October 1st to October 1st, and I pulled this off from just 2 days ago. We're still at between 150 and 300% of normal. We basically got 3 seasons worth of rain, of average rainfall in this one season. It's a lot of water. In addition to the rainfall, a lot of snowfall throughout the state. This again was from just several days ago. From the percent of normal of snow, we're at almost 300% of normal. I flew back from Sacramento in a meeting last week, and going along the Sierra foothills, I was looking at what are all those white lines coming out of the mountains. Those are all rapids and whitewater that are flowing out of the Sierras. The flooding is phenomenal right now that's coming out of the Sierras. If you follow anything on social media in Yosemite or Mammoth, all that snow has to go somewhere, and it's melting and flowing into the reservoirs, which is great for a certain extent. So when you get water from the atmosphere and it percolates into the soil, you get soil moisture. And the plants like atmospheric moisture, they like rain, but what they're really collecting, all this vegetation with these leaves, is collecting moisture for the vegetation. And if that moisture is in the ground, it'll pull it up. I have never seen, in all my years, things bloom like they did this year. The flowers that we still have blooming out there are phenomenal. I feel like a master gardener at my house. And I know that I am not, because in the last 20 years, I have killed more plants than anybody in this room, I guarantee it. And not because I wasn't trying. So, a lot of soil moisture that is residual from 3 times the amount of rain that we experienced over this season. So, when you get that much rain, what does our drought look like? Everybody talks about drought. We've heard that on the news constantly for the last decade. So, for Southern California, for our area, we have come out of drought status. Now, this is the drought that the vegetation is feeling. Where we get our water and where different communities get their water is different than what this map is showing. Because Colorado and the Colorado River, they did not fare nearly as well as California did. So you may still be hearing about drought from a regional standpoint because of where our water is imported from. So what does this all do? What does this all come together? The things that we care about as firefighters are ignition, the spread, and then once it does start, we care about how intense it is, how far the fire will spot those embers. We also care about things like torching. And torching is when a tree succumbs to the fire and burns from the base all the way to the top, and it becomes an excellent ember source, lofting those embers because it's up into the wind stream at that point. Care about that. And then once it gets into the canopy of the trees, it can then burn across the top of the trees, and we call that crowning. All those things there are a function of all these things on the outside. How compact the fuels are, how much loading there is it continuous horizontally, is it continuous vertically? What's the chemical content? Some of the vegetation that we have in our wildland here, like the chamise, the chaparral species, they go without getting a sip of water from, on a typical year, from about April to November. Imagine what it takes to be able to withstand not getting any water for 6 to 9 months. They're what we call drought-adapted vegetation. And the way that they can do that is their chemical content. They have oils and waxes and resins that allow them to hold on to the moisture that they do get. But the bad part about that is, if you've ever seen an oil fire, a wax fire, or resins, those things burn very hot. And that's why when fire gets into our native vegetation here, that smoke that is dark black, it's literally like an oil fire produced by the vegetation. So that chemical content is really important. And then obviously the size and the shape, but the one thing that touches every single one of these, if you look at those dotted lines, is moisture content. The more moisture content in the vegetation or that stored energy, the more resilient it is to resist fire. So if you keep your vegetation in a healthy state, and it has lots of moisture in it, when the fire does impact it, it would have to drive that moisture off first, then allow that plant to burn. I have seen ice plant burn, but it absorbed so much energy when that fire front hit it, it had to drive out a lot of the moisture, and once it burned, the fire kind of fell flat on its face. So one of the products that our fire prevention folks have in the back is different types of vegetation that you can plant that are more resilient to fire than others. Sometimes the ones that look really wonderful aren't so good. But we can help guide you through how to choose a plant palette that is resistant to for your vegetation. And a lot of it has a good aesthetic to it as well. So that moisture content is key. We had, from my description, pretty much optical optimal growing conditions. Whether the vegetation was the light grasses or the trees and the brush, everything was enjoying quite a bit of water. And like I said, I've never seen anything grow like this in over 30 years. It's hard to see on this picture here, but it says multiple growths of fine fuels, old and new intermixed. You can see there are like there's dead grass that's intermixed with this live grass. Because we had rain and sun, grass is like a hungry teenager going into your fridge. They don't care, they'll just eat, and as long as there's something to eat, they'll do it, and then they'll come back for another round. Grass is the same way. If it gets moisture and it gets sun, it'll grow. And then it'll set seed, and then that seed will drop, and then it'll grow again. Currently, I'm counting between 2 and 3 full growths of grass in not just our area here, but in most of Southern California and the state. I don't know if anybody saw the news, that fire that went through Lancaster day before yesterday. They're not getting the marine influence, but what they did get in the desert was an amazing amount of rain. I drove up to Mammoth about 3 weeks ago, and the grass from the top of the Cajon Pass all the way to Johannesburg, which is about halfway to Ridgecrest on 395, was continuous, and it was between ankle and knee high in the desert. And I worked for my first 7 years in the fire service out in Hesperia, and I can tell you, I never saw it like that. So those type of fires that are grass-fed are going to be the prime drivers of the fire, especially in those desert areas. And those grassy areas of the state. Kern County in Central Valley has already experienced, probably a dozen or more fires in the last week and a half. So lots of grass still growing because we continue to have moisture and rain, and we have old grass that is mixed in there. We measure the moisture content in our live fuels, our larger fuels, things like chamise and sumac, to keep a trend of where we are in the season, in a typical season, and we compare analogous years to others. If we had a big year like 2007, San Diego fire, 2020, we have those years where we can look back at the vegetation, the moisture profile, and kind of help predict where we're going to be by letting the past inform the future. You can see where the average line is here. It's black on the slide. And then this is where we are up here right now. And then this is critical fuel moisture. And this was just from several days ago. So we are well above average in our measured fuels, our brush component. A lot of moisture still in that part of the vegetation. When we look out more broadly, what does the National Weather Service say that we're going to get looking out for the next several months? With precipitation, they're saying we're in this equal chances. It's a roll of the dice. It's probably going to be an average precipitation year for us for June, July, and August. And then for our drought, we're still going to stay out of the drought for the next 3 months. This is important for us to know because we do send resources in mutual aid to our partners throughout the state. And people throughout the state are in a pretty good soil moisture, fuel moisture condition as we are right now down here. We share mutual aid, we come to help, they come to help us. When we have our big fires, we go to help them. So not only are we always looking in our own backyard, but we're looking in a broad scale to see what our neighbors and how much drawdown we would get. The Geographic Area Coordination Center, there's 2 of them in California. One is in Riverside, and the other one is up in Redding. We split the state up in half for fire danger. This product comes out the first of every month for a 3 to 4 month cycle. And this came out June 1st, so this is the latest information, looking at significant fire potential. So for the month of June, we are below normal. And it doesn't take a brain surgeon to figure out why. We've had a really persistent marine layer because the water temperature off the coast right now is really cold, and that gives us more marine layer. If you could see past the marine layer out towards the mountains, they've been getting quite a bit of thunderstorm activity, and that's because the sea surface temperatures in the Gulf of Mexico over towards Texas, the sea surface temperatures are higher, and there's a lot of moisture that's been coming up. We have had true monsoonal moisture patterns since mid-May, which is really unheard of. So we have moisture coming from the ocean into Southern California, and we have moisture coming from the east into Southern California right now. So our soil moisture is high. We're getting a lot of moisture from both ends, pushing into Southern California and into this region. And so that tells you that we're really going to be in a good position for June. Not that we're not going to have any fires, but we're not going to have significant fires in the month of June in our area, according to everything that they're seeing. But when we go to July and September, when this marine layer starts pulling back, the days are continuing to get longer, our hottest months of the year, this marine layer will basically be absorbed into the atmosphere on a daily basis, get some more sun on the ground, where we're going to be in a normal position. They're looking at thunderstorm activity being near normal. Temperatures are going to be a little bit below normal all the way into July, which is not totally unheard of for us. But we're also going to be a little cooler all the way up into September at this point. And then we've already talked about the marine layer and its effect going into the next couple months. So this is a tool that we use as firefighters in a little pocket guide. We're really big on checklists like in the aviation community. And so this is one of the checklists that we use in one of our little guides. And this is our look up, down, and around. And we always pay special attention to the indicators in gold. And we call the fire area our fire environment. And with the fuels, or that stored energy, one of the things we really look at is continuous fine fuels. And fine fuels are the grass, the weeds, anything that can ignite easily. And we are definitely there for the fire season 2023, especially when we start getting into August. We will not be enjoying the same conditions, the same fire environment we are now into July. You add that to a typical fire season where things are hot and dry and steep, we do have quite a bit of potential that's setting up for later in the summer and into the fall. The good news is you have several months to truly prepare your home for all this extra stored energy on the ground. All these things that are blooming are going to be sitting there as stored energy. If somebody were to walk out behind your property with a 1-gallon jug of gasoline and set it on the hill behind your house, you go, wow, that's kind of strange. But let's say somebody walked out there with 50 gallons and put it out there. Hello? Somebody just put 50 gallons of gas on the hill behind my house. Well, that's going to be what it's going to be like this year. Because this is unprecedented growth of stored energy that's going to be on the ground. And come August and September and October, when we get into Santa Ana season, and the fire environment is hot and dry and windy, and embers are going to be launched long distances, flame lengths will be high, intensity and speed will be very fast. There won't be time to get ready. We always say in the fire department, if you stay ready, you don't have to get ready. So this is your time to get ready. What it's going to start out with right now is our fire growth is going to be aspect dependent, meaning the sun shines mostly on south-facing and west-facing slopes in the northern hemisphere. That's where the fuels, the grass, and the brush are going to start carrying and losing their moisture sooner. Those slopes are going to become more and more susceptible as we get to the longest days and hottest days of summer. But the north-facing slopes that are get a little less solar radiation, they're going to hold on to that moisture they have in the soil, and we're going to use that as a barrier when we go out and set our strategy for fire spray. It's also going to be wind dependent. You saw in those pictures from the coastal fire last year how much defensible space was there. That fire had what we call alignment. It went from the bottom of the slope, and heat rises, and it went right up the slope, had abundant energy to tap into. As the fire was laid down, like you see on this picture here, it preheated the fuels in front of it, dried them out, and it was a perfect focusing of that energy right into those certain streets and those communities. So this is going to be what our fire season is going to look like at the very beginning. Aspect dependent and wind dependent. But as we get into the peak season, we're going to talk about the abundant flame fuels like we have been, where things are what we call receptive. When you build a campfire, you don't throw big logs on it and go to the match, right? You start with small kindling, you start with small grass, you throw some sticks in there, and then you get it going. The grass that we have, the multiple growths of grass, are going to become very receptive in the next month. We're going to get a lot of roadside starts. Cigarettes, people having their boat chain dragging, causing a spark. Catalytic converter detonating and sending hot metal into the brush. On years that we don't get a lot of rain and the fine fuels are sparse, we don't get a lot of those. This year, every square inch of ground that can grow grass has grown grass. And so we're looking at more and more roadside starts this season than we have in previous seasons. Once it gets into the grass and the grass starts burning, that grass doesn't have a lot of stored energy compared to a log or a tree. But what it does do, it releases all of its energy at once. And that energy is just spread through the vegetation very quickly. So when we do get fires that start in the grass, they're going to move with purpose. They will move with purpose until they're impacted by either us or they run into some vegetation that maybe has a higher moisture content. And that transition to the larger fuel components is going to be in our favor, I think, until probably August. Those larger fuels, the brush, the challis, all that is going to help us it's going to be an impedance when it goes from the grass to the brush. And then there's going to come a day, late September probably, where that's not going to be the case anymore. And it's going to tap into that heavy fuel loading and be able to move through the fuel components. One of the fancy terms we use is resistance to control. Right now, there's low resistance to control. We can send somebody out with a garden hose and put out most of the roadside starts we have right now. As we go through the season, resistance control is going to become more and more problematic. And with all these light fuels and receptivity, September and October, we have a higher than normal potential for large fire, significant fire potential. And with that, hopefully I gave you kind of both sides of the coins. I'm willing to take any questions you have on any of this, whether the fuel, weather, topography, what the fastest land animal is, whatever question you have. And I will be here afterwards to answer any questions.